Welcome to the Cowboy Office Show, where you'll experience expert analysis and epic discussion on key pillars of the equine industry, including sports, business, hobby, and the horse lifestyle. Your co-hosts are Jody Brainerd and Brian Dykert, industry veterans with over 120 years combined living the cowboy lifestyle. The Cowboy Office Show will help you get involved, ask more questions, and create change. We'll keep riding for you as together we learn from the ride already ridden, learn to listen better to our horse, and make our industry better for all. Each weekly episode will take a ride around the industry in less time than you can load the truck and trailer. Drop your email at cowboyoffice.com to receive weekly updates and never miss an episode. Saddle up as we ride into today's show.
Hello, Horse World. This one's for you. You asked, we're answering. Welcome to the Cowboy Office. I'm Brian.
And I'm Jody. Welcome. We're going to answer each and every question directly asked from our website. Go to cowboyoffice.com and join along. You know, we've combined the ones that are the same or similar, and we'll make a direct reference to the shows that have guests or that addresses the questions as well. This one's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it, Brian.
Good. I'm glad. Yes, what we've done is pretty simple because we took all the questions and kind of found common denominators and themes. And so we've broken them into the 8 big categories, and then you and I are going to talk about it. We're going to waltz right through, and we'll make direct reference to episodes that we've had guests on. So don't forget to hit the subscribe button on whatever platform you use. We appreciate it. It helps us keep going. To jump right in, the first question, industry trends, the good and the not so good. If you go to our website, cowboyoffice.com, or any one of your platforms, episode 7, the American Horse Council. We had Julie Broadway, the president of the American Horse Council, on, and we had a great episode talking about the industry on a larger platform, and it's very fascinating. And just for everybody's info, because the American Horse Council is underway now with the 2023 economic impact study for the industry. So if you're a horse owner, you should go to the American Horse Council website, find the survey, and fill out the survey. It's a true economic study, and it's in everybody's best interest. So there you are. You'll also find, because in 2012 there was a study, 2017 there was a study, and then the one that's going on now, I'm anxious to see the results of that. And the big one is twofold. I think economics is kind of a no-brainer, but it's really the numbers. How many people, how many horses, is the industry growing, is it staying the same? I can't wait to find out some of those answers.
Well, we've got some really good answers to some of those questions ahead of us. I know, because we've had a chance to talk about those a little bit, and from a economic impact, from a couple of guys that have retired, but we're still very, very close to this, and we're very aware of what horses cost and the amount of money that's being spent right now. I can't wait to see what the results of the AHC study is going to be. When we look at event levels, we're seeing so much enthusiasm, the energy. There's a huge difference now between what we call a weekend show and a major event. You want to, talk a little bit about that, Brian, because that's an important one, and I've got lots of stuff that's important to me about that. But anyway.
Well, yeah, and I think you got to first kind of, the breed shows are the breed shows. I'm not trying to be judgmental. They're just a different. What the breed shows do is offer a vast array of disciplines inside them. Then you have the advanced disciplines that have, evolved up out of there over the last 60 plus years. And so when you look at the discipline level, especially on the cowboy side of the industry, we are seeing a distinct separation or step between what we would call weekend horse shows, which is just a weekend horse show, a weekend horse discipline show, and the major events. That's a distinct difference, where not too long ago, that was all the same. The exhibitors were the same, the horses were the same, fundamentally the event was the same. We're now seeing major events starting to step up and out. They're creating events, not just horse shows. They are attracting a spectator. They are putting on high-level finals. They are making it attractive, not only streaming. Now we're seeing television start to come in. And so we're seeing that distinct separation, and I think it falls right into your economics, which, so now that means to people they've got to start thinking a little bit more and take their time a little bit more, because you can jump into some deep water fast, and you better be ready.
Yeah, that's no kidding. And, you've heard me say it more times than anyone else has. The answer is always in the middle. And I from a guy who had a barn full of non-pro horses and would keep, I didn't keep the barn for horses exclusively for me to ride. I had a chance to ride lots and lots of good ones and won lots of money on them. But I always had them in mind to go to the non-pro rider. That was just the niche that I decided to fill. So it worked very, very well for me. But from a guy's standpoint, I will tell you that, I grew up in Minnesota, and that North Central Reining Horse Association up there has always been a really good one. But that's when I was 18, 19, 20 years old. And I don't even want to tell you how many years ago that was, right? We'll make people guess. But Amy, my wife, and I, she was just online with a friend of hers this morning talking about that North Central Futurity, which has always been just a great one in St. Paul. And it's a group of trainers up there that form the North Central Reining Horse Association, and they know how to put on great weekend shows, and they know how to make it attractive to trainers also, because they only retain 10%, which is something that's huge from an entry standpoint, because most of the shows, NRHA allows you to retain 50% of the entry money, and so that North Central kicks that back into the purse, which makes it pay way, way better than your normal small futurity would. But Amy was just telling me, she said, there are 50 RV spots at that Minnesota State Fairgrounds this morning, and she said they are never sold out. This year, level full. Can't fit another one in there, and they're looking for more spots or for people to give one up if they possibly can. So that just tells you that this thing's crazy. The number of living quarter trailers that are being sold, all the way, trickle-down effect is huge, not just from the horse standpoint, but it's amazing. And I loved the weekend shows. You and I, when we were doing this, that's what we started with, and we would go to the road, maybe 2 major events, and that's what we would do. But that weekend show, and I think there's still spots for that, and it seems like everything needs to be bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and I think that there are places for that to happen. But certainly for that weekend show to get people started and involved, I will personally tell you, I've just kind of give this thing up seriously over the last couple of years, and it was a hell of a lot more fun to take 15 horses to a show 10 or 15 years ago than it was just recently. It used to be fun, and now it's like, oh boy, it's not that way anymore.
Well, and I was just traveling, and I was at just following the Yankee Reining Horse had a weekend horse show 10 days ago, and so I hear you. And it's going to be interesting to see 23 numbers, because 2022 has produced number of horse shows, and I don't care if you look at the breeds or disciplines, but number of horse shows in 2022 is almost back to the level that it was in 2019 pre-pandemic. So in total volume, the industry is not quite back where it was, but it's close. And we are seeing reports of X events that are having robust entries, robust amount of horses. They're selling out stalls and RVs like what you're talking about. But you're seeing other events that aren't. Like, for example, last week was the Summer Slide in Denver. And in our day, that was one of the top 5 or 6 events that almost everybody in the country would go to. It was first fraternity, blah, blah, blah. But that thing was always sold out into the gills. Well, this year it's not, and it was very reasonable. I'm not saying one's good or bad. It's just the reshifting of the industry, and I agree with you, because everybody's saying where's the fun and lower the cost. And the episode we did with Marnie Langer out of California hits on that subject a lot as well. And again, it just emphasizes in my mind the distinct difference that the industry is yearning for. It's demanding that it does, which is the governing bodies have got to start looking at the industry differently. And the upper end, the major events, need to be looked at in a completely different light than the lower end. And if we did that, rules, ownership of horses, competition functions per class, per discipline, eligibility, purse money. The NRHA just had a rule change that will be in effect for 24, and I disagree with this because they're still stuck in the old way, which was an open and a non-pro had to be offered in a slate of classes and had to be offered at equal or more money. I was back there in those days, and I remember those days, and I agreed in those days. But in today's time, I disagree because I think the weekend horse show, and I don't care if you're in Denver or Minneapolis or Buffalo, New York or Ocala, Florida or Scottsdale, Arizona or Del Mar, California, you should be able to tailor an event to your exhibitor pool and or if you are putting on an event to attract a spectator. And that's where I think we've got to start to go, and the industry's not moving there yet. But that's my 20 cents on that one.
No, I couldn't agree more, and I think that most of our viewers know that part of the refreshing thing about the Cowboy Office Show is that a couple of guys with a great deal of experience get to say pretty much about what they really feel like because we don't make stuff up, right? I mean, it's true. But I would pose this question to you. We haven't talked about this, you and I have not, but I can potentially see at some point in time, if someone decides that NRHA doesn't want to approve their show, that they're just going to go ahead and have it anyway. I see that potentially happening. I mean, from the standpoint of if I want to tailor it this way because this is the way that my people want it, and NRHA says no, do you think that that's a possibility?
Well, of course, but I'll tell you what in the NRHA's case, we're speaking about one governing body at the moment because we just saw it in 23 because the Performance Horseman was getting ready to do that. Now, I can't speak from the NCHA and the NRCHA, and I have my view because on the cow horses with them being three-phased and how the performance horse put on that entire event, this is just my opinion. In the cow horses, I would have not done the cutting section. Highlight the NCHA cutters, highlight the cow horses that do one or two. You could certainly talk about that it's a three-phased event, but they could have just highlighted the fence work and marked it just on the fence work and gone on with it and then let the reiners do the reiners. But the reiners did a modified pattern, and that in itself is not, that doesn't exist. And so what did the NRHA do? And they just put in the rule book so that event producers could request modified patterns is one, but some other functions and rules of production is two. And so event producers can request ahead of time to do some modified things. I think that's the first step that they're trying to do, but I wholeheartedly agree with you. There is nothing that stops any producer from putting on a non-sanctioned horse show or horse event. That can happen any day of the week. Now the issue gets into you've got to be ready, because if you're going to put up purse money and make it significant, then you've got to have rules and enforcement and integrity and supply lines, including drugs, because you've got to keep that competitive playing field as fair as possible. And that's where the governance comes in anyways. You will see when we look at the rules that fundamentally that's what the NRHA is doing now. They are a governing body, which that's really what all of them do. They're governance and records. So that's what they do. Do I think that there's a number of different ways by which we can help all of those things move forward without the slowness of rule change bureaucracy and you're 2 years behind whatever the industry's wanting? I mean, for example, the 24 rule changes were just voted on in the NRHA 60 days ago. So
right.
if you were wanting to submit a rule change for next year, you've already missed it. You're talking about 25 now.
Right. Well, and I tell you, it's like I don't need to open up a huge can of worms here, but there's a little information probably that maybe many of our viewers were never aware of. But in the past, Europe used to, and I'm talking 20 years ago plus, Europe would have some huge money events that weren't approved because they ran by their own set of rules. Well, NRHA decided you can't do that. Both from the record-keeping standpoint, that was kind of the excuse. We need to be able to keep records, and so we want to know how much money. And that, I mean, very valid. It totally is. But then NRHA's response to that was to use the judges committee as the police force. In other words, they said then, if you don't follow our rules, you are not going to have one of our judges. So, and then that put the pressure on us. My guys, when we chaired the committee, no, you can't go judge that. You can't personally take money for that because NRHA won't allow it and will maybe take your card away if you do that. So that was a big old catch-22 that I totally disagreed with, but it's not the official's responsibility to be the police force, but that was the way that it was, and to a certain extent probably still today. So
yeah, it still is. And so, yeah. Well, I think from a sports standpoint, when you talk about international, and that's one of the questions on here, so we'll get to that in a minute, but an international governing body in any of the disciplines, and that's a big question. And so we'll hold off on that one and we'll get there. And we're on the same subject, but because the next question directly in line is about the entry-level horse show enthusiast or hobbyist. And I don't care how they're arranged, via IRS and business and all those things. And you got some luxury in the livestock world when you talk about hobby and tax ramifications. Don't want to get into all that stuff. I call that a luxury. But the point is the entry-level people in the cowboy disciplines are daunted by the expense. And we've been talking about that. You and I not too long ago, and we're going to have it here again. But when you talk about the prices on yearling horses right now in the stock industry, you and I could have, we used to dream about it, but we never thought that was possible. Well, it's here. How long is it going to stay? And the question is the amount of expense to get into the industry. That's not new. I've heard it my whole lifetime. And so, do you have to spend everything? Do you have to take a second mortgage on the house or whatever to play in the horses? My answer is no, you don't. And I would tell everybody, and I always have, if you stay in your means and you stay patient, you can play this and get out of it everything that you want. If you listen to too many others, they will sell you gobs of stuff, and they will do it over and over, and yes, they're going to get in your pocket, and it's going to cost. So that's really in the power of the consumer. And the downside in our industry is you don't have like 6 of them in every town. You might have to go a couple counties over before you found whether it's a breeder or a trainer or somebody in the horse business that's got a horse that you can look at to buy, or whatever that is. And I've been a big advocate of this one for a long time, which is ownership, because I think ownership on the horses at the entry level is the single easiest thing to change and make it easier for more people to get in. And how do you now control the outcome? It's not put money on entry-level classes. We shouldn't jackpot them. We shouldn't do any of those things. You want $15 and $20 entry fees and let people get experience and advanced skills and borrow horses and rent horses and work that out on an individual level. But who cares who owns them? And is anybody on the top end of the industry going to borrow out their $100,000 4 or 5 year old? Probably not. And if it's their kid and that's what they want to do, God bless them. So anyways, that's the big one. But the pressure, the economic pressure, is what the industry is absolutely feeling and seeing, and it's having a tendency to squeeze out that average middle person. You got a take on it?
And I do. And you and I have seen this. And back in the old days, we would call that trying to keep up with the Joneses, right? I mean, that was what. But we had both seen, clients, and we have seen trainers way outspend their budget because they felt like they needed to do that to stay up to keep up, and it's something that invariably catches you, and it will never work in the long run. I mean, it just doesn't happen. And And, like I said, that answer is in the middle. If you stay within your budget, just exactly like you said, you can have a great deal of fun. But you have to know what you want, and you have to be unafraid to stay where you're at. I mean, it's very simple. We talk about the price of horses, and I never ever believed that they would ever cost what they are, but I never believed that a new dually would cost $110,000 either. So, it's kind of relative. It's crazy, but yeah, there's still ways to have fun in this business and to go compete. And that's what I would constantly tell non-pro riders. It's the same thing. You're not trying to beat the person next to you. You're trying to have the best run you possibly can have on that day, given the horse that you have to ride. So anyway, that's my take on that too. And I mean, it's a good one. I will. Yes, go ahead.
That's $1 million statement, which you're really competing against yourself or against a standard of excellence. That's really what you're competing on, and then advancing your skills. So if you stayed within that realm, but what's your take when people tell you that they struggle with finding horse trainers with integrity? How do you tell people to navigate those waters?
That's a super good question, and I've had a great deal of experience with that over the years, with people coming to me and people asking me, and I first of all, you have to do some homework, and you have to know what you want, okay? Because you just can't, people watch Yellowstone and go, I want to do this. It's like, well, okay, do you want to have a 3-year-old? Do you want to be an owner? Are you a non-pro? Are you a rookie rider? Do you have kids that you want to get involved? But you have to know, first of all, what you want to do. And then my advice is to find someone that's having success at what you want. And I'm not talking about a trainer. I'm talking about if you say, I want a rookie rider, I want a non-pro rider, I want my youth kids, I'm going to check show results, and I'm going to find who in what I want is doing really, really well. And then I'm going to go talk to that person. I'm going to talk to the owner. I'm going to talk to the parent. I'm going to talk to the non-pro rider, to the rookie rider, whatever level I want. I'm going to go talk to the people. I'm not going to march up to the trainers first, because, when I was a kid, every mother wanted their son to be a doctor. Well, let me tell you something. There's some doctors that aren't good too. I mean,
there's a lot.
Right. So, and the horse trainers they're not equal either. And, you got horse trainers that will definitely try to talk you into outselling your budget, and you don't want that. But the way to find that person with the integrity is to go word of mouth. Still means a great deal in this business. I mean, it's like you go talk to successful people that aren't professionals. And then when you talk to 3 or 4 of them and you get 3 or 4, yes, I'm super happy with this guy and that's what I want. And then I'm going to go tell them to talk to the trainer. Find the guy that's maybe coaching those people or training them. And then probably the next most important thing that I will tell you it doesn't have much to do with the trainer, but you nail down every single thing from a financial standpoint before you start that you possibly can. I mean, mileage, horse costs, day charges, commissions, everything. And you'll have no surprises then. But if you just trust this person to take care of you, whoa, sometimes and still to this day I get people calling me going, holy mackerel, I got this bill and I'm like, did you talk about that? Well, no. Well, then the answer's in the middle. So, that's as good of advice that I can give you. But unless you know what you want first, you can't find the answer to that question.
Well, I think that's a great advice and great way to approach it. And I've always answered that one. I don't think that I've always found it fascinating that statement kind of wanted to be isolated around horse trainers. And I would tell you it's around any professional that you want. I don't care if it's a doctor, a lawyer, IT person in today's time. You want to talk about if you don't have your head on straight and know what you want, start letting the IT guys take you for a roll, because they will in 2 seconds. So I don't think it's isolated to trade, services, and professions. I just think it's had it. I don't know why we've always heard it. I think your advice is 100%, which is defining what you want first, and then the other one is not new news either, which is communication. It's and if you're paying the bills, you get to drive it.
Absolutely.
And if you don't, then shame on you.
Yeah. I've talked to, tons of non-pro people over the years that have been really taken advantage of. And I don't want to make our business, I'm talking not just in the reining horse business, but in the horse business overall. I mean, and I said, did you tell them no? Oh, no, I was afraid. I was like, what? You're paying for it, right?
Right.
You're paying for it. It's competitive. There's always someone else that you can go to that it's not like, you don't, and it doesn't mean, because I've had clients that also would like to be the only one in the barn, and those don't work either. I mean, the answer's in the middle. There's got to be mutual respect, both from the trainer and the client. So
yeah, well, I think you hit a big one, which is define what you want, and the difference there's so many different places in the industry to play that if you want to be an owner and you want to own a horse that wins a futurity, that's very different than you want to win the Rookie of the Year championship, and now you need a coach. So
right.
You might need several people, including a great vet that's good on soundness, and the whole equine veterinary profession is and it's in distress right now. And from what I hear from practicing veterinarians, it's kind of regional, because if you've got pockets of the horse industry that have a robust industry on the ground, then the equine vets are there and coming there and blah, blah, blah. But you get into some of the other spots, and I just had a conversation with a vet a week ago that he'd been advertising for 3 years to find an equine practitioner to come to his practice, and he can't find it. And that conversation that we've had, and we know this, and the point is the equine profession, because veterinarians are going down different paths, and they're leaving the equine and the livestock because it's harder work to others. Well, there aren't enough others in today's time. So, but having an equine vet, if you're going to compete, it doesn't matter. If you're going to have a competitive horse wherever you are, you got to have a team of pros around that are looking after your interests, and away you go. So, yeah, define what you want. I love it.
Absolutely, for sure.
Okay, we're going to hit the hot topic, because this is one everybody always wants to talk about. And so this was asked, I didn't even count how many individual times, but it was a no-brainer when we were pulling all the questions that came across the website. Drugs and tails. And the use of drugs in today's modern discipline sport, and the fact that we're one of the few countries that do this process of blocking their tails. And so it's gotten better, there's no doubt about it, but we still do some silly stuff. So, and I know that this is not an easy question, but it's not, because in today's time, the question really becomes, how do we use modern medicine and modern knowledge for everyone's best interest without influencing competition? Because a fair, equal, competitive field is what everybody wants. Bar none, that's the end goal. So the complex quest, and nobody's been able to solve this. USEF has not been able to solve it. FEI couldn't solve it. AQHA couldn't solve it. APHA couldn't. Nobody's been able to solve it yet on the use of modern drugs and keeping a fair playing field. But the fact that the NRHA has a modified sedative allowance, and they just did the Derby a month ago under those rules, and in the 24 rule change packet, they're going to increase the drug fee across the industry. And I can't wait to see, one, are they going to publish net results? Two, are they going to publish macro data? Because if you take, if you got 25,000 entries across the year, how many of those were tested, and then what's the results of those tests? That's macro stuff without having to get into the proprietary, personal data. As an industry, that's going to be interesting stuff to see where we kind of end up. And every entry in the sport's going to start paying that bill. So if we don't get a handle on it, I don't know what that means, but we're headed we're headed to try. So at least I give them credit. And we did an episode with the president and vice president of the NRHA. You can find that one as well out there on our website because we talked about this with those guys. So, but the question is a common one. Everybody asks it, and they don't want to say it out loud. And we're going to get into that issue too. But the use of drugs and why we still block tails and why we do it in an advanced discipline. I still get confused. So I know you've got some interesting views here.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And from the tail standpoint, I've thought that forever, and I've said this numerous times, even on our shows. And I always felt like, from a tail standpoint, because there are certain lines of horses that aren't tail users, and I always felt like if I have a mare that produces some nice foals that don't use their tails, and mine should be worth $50,000 more than yours because you're saying I have to knock it down. And from the tail standpoint, I lay this off on the trainers. I do, because there's very few non-pros or owners that would do that unless the trainer says we need to do this. And from the judges' standpoint, we are getting better. I do want to say that because I'm seeing more and more tails that are carried naturally, and more judges just ignoring that. If that horse carries that tail straight out, it's fine. They still mark them. You know what I mean? But the reason that AQHA could never get a hold of it is because, there wasn't any, they tried tickle test. They would do whatever. I've had numerous World Show horses back in the day tested, where a veterinarian come up and scratch underneath their tail to see if that horse could actually lift it. You know what I mean? But, some horses are, very, very sensitive, and they carry their tail very, very naturally. But, when we see a bad block, those things are slapping off their hocks, it's the ugliest thing in the world. And it's, you've taken away some ability for that thing to fight bugs for the rest of his life, and some of the ways that they're doing tails now too. So I've never been a proponent of that. I've fought that very hard as I could. In fact, I put in for the rule change when I chaired the judges committee. I said, look, you remember the old line, any device that would affect circulation or movement of a tail was not allowed. And I lobbied way, way hard for weighted tail bags and weighted tails, because to me, that was way the kinder of the two things to do to a horse. If we had to go show him, for a couple hours to weight the tail, than to go ahead and block it and take it away from him or her forever. So, yeah, the tails, I don't have the answer to that, but I will tell you that if the officiating has a great deal to do with it, and we can still find a horse that uses his tail like crazy. We can find that offensive, and a sign of non-willingness, right? But as judges, as professionals, we have to be aware that we want what's best for this horse, and he can still stop, turn, and run circles and change leads without having his tail knocked down. So, we just have to keep working on the officiating, and, owners have to say, you know what? No, we don't want it. So, but, it comes down to money, right? If that's the bottom line. A guy says, look, we'll win more if we do this. And that's not the answer. But yeah, you're right. That's a tough subject, and there's been people that have taken hold of that thing forever and haven't been able to fix it. But I will step up and give you an opinion on the medication and some of the personal thoughts that I have about that. And I've told many people over the years that if any time that there is an event that pays money, and I'm talking about futurities, derbies, whatever, there should be no sedatives allowed. I 100% disagree with that, because if I have a horse that I can show without it and you have one that shows with it, right, I should be able to beat you, right? It's like you're telling me my horse is weak and he's not as good as yours.
Yeah, you're going to be temporarily out of control more than me. So
right.
Yes.
You're just leveling the playing field with medication. But there are some spots, and especially in today's markets where they cost so much money, some older horses can still have great careers at starter level classes. I'm talking like, say, short stirrup kids 10 and under, green riders, even up into the rookie level riders. Some of those great old horses can still be shown. They're sound, they're happy, they're fat, they practice great, but they carry a little bit of anxiety when they go into the show pen. And, I talked to you about it before we started. It's, I have a dog that the Thunder makes her crazy, and she's a great dog, right? Love the heck out of her. But the little hemp treats do wonders for her. Calm her, like she's like, oh, I've thought about taking a couple of those myself, right? It's like, but they do great things for her. And it's people take anti-anxiety meds all the time for a stressful situation and don't think anything about it. I'm talking about a separation here. I'm talking about some great old horses that could still be used and still have careers and get people in at an affordable level, but not where we're talking about paying somebody $500,000, which, by the way, they don't allow that at the Run for $1 Million at all. And,
Right.
Our futurities and derbies should not either.
Right. And again, Run for $1 Million is an example of what you're talking about, which is doing something that there aren't rules for. And they're actually doing the right thing, and they're going beyond, because the depth of competition is what they're creating at that level. And yes, you're 100% correct. And I hear you. And I hear you on every level, including, but you're talking about two different things. One is things in our normal behavior or routine day. I'm talking about your dog that gets goofy about the thunderstorms, and that's common. I get it, which is a little bit different than when you go to compete. And it's no different. You and I can go play a round of golf, and we both have aching knees and hips, and we might take a whatever it is so that they don't ache as much. And but we're not competing against all the rest of them.
Right.
So when you talk, hang on for a second, because I hear you loud and clear. But I think the point is very valid. If we as an industry would start to look at the different levels of how people are playing, how the industry is playing the game. And what I would tell you, which is the answer that you're making reference to, is at the entry level, I think there should be a lot of latitude and a lot of allowances. You can modify the rules, you can modify the judging and officiating, you can modify the patterns, you can modify all those things and make it easier, including looking after your horse's best interest, which is the use of modern medicine so that they can stay happy and all that stuff. But when you go up the ladder in competition, and that comes back to what do you want? And if you want to win the fraternity, or you want to win the Run for the $1 Million, or you want to win the world's greatest horseman, then you've got some more stuff to do, and using drugs for an unfair competitive advantage is a no-no, period.
Absolutely.
And all sports are working their way through all of that stuff. So, yeah.
For sure. Okay.
And we're a little bit behind on it, so I say that one. On the tail one, I think we're way beyond it, because I know where it came from, and I was against it then. And the point to the story is this. Yes, on trainers, I agree with you, but I would put more weight on the officiating, because if you want to know a large portion of why circles are so hard to consistently mark, it's because the tails and the profile and the balance of those horses, because that's what officials are looking at. And you're not hiding. I've always said this. There is no hiding in reining. It's one of the greatest parts that attracted me to it when I was very young, because you got what you earned, period. And so I think you still do. But when you talk about tails, because it does interrupt those things, and can it be seen and dealt with? Yes. Can you always figure it out when you got a -half on those circles? No, you can't, because you can't climb in their mind. But if you did that consistently enough across 3 or 4 months, you'd figure it out quick, that either your horse's balance is being compensated and or they got a bad tail job and it's really offensive.
Right.
And so,
well, and I couldn't agree with you more. And I've had discussion about this too. The only The only question I would have here, in playing the devil's advocate, is laying too much of that off on the officials, because, we've got some people that can pass the test that aren't horsemen or horse women, and they can get their card, and I will tell you, cannot tell the difference between a naturally good quiet-tailed horse and one that has been laid down and bouncing off hocks. So if we say, well, you have to make maneuver reduction for that horse that has that quiet tail, they're going to slap the natural one because they have no idea. I mean, they just can't. That part doesn't see. So I mean, and there's always a little bit of a risk there too. But I agree with you. It's the judges that are the ones that have to say the tail carried straight out, as long as it's quiet, whatever, is okay. I mean, I agree with you, 100%.
Well, true, and on the fact of having officials that need to go through the own regiment of advancing skills and becoming a great official is a whole separate topic. And
Right.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. And so, yes, we've got to do a better job, one, at looking at common denominators to become an official, and then two, how do you build and groom and teach and mentor and lead officials to be great officials. And then you've got another chore, which is have them perform at peak performance every time you need it. And we're nowhere
Right.
near any of that. But
No,
and
absolutely
yes, I
no.
agree with you on the competence variety in officials. That's true. And should non-horsemen, is being a horseman a common denominator in the ingredients to make a great official? Yes, it is. It's very hard for a non-horse person to get through that. It can be done, but it's very hard.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Real quick, bring up, before we move on to the next question, I wanted you to see, because it's interesting, which is the NRHA rule changes for 2024, because they were just voted on 45, 60 days ago. They've been well published. This goes through the rule changes, and we won't spend the time to go through every one of them, but there's a common theme in here. And if you look at this, because these are the rules that got approved with amendments. And so this is the amateur derby. So it's creating an amateur derby division for categories 2 and 6. And so let's go to the next one. So it got passed. It's amended. The amateur division. I find it fascinating. We're going to have amateurs inside non-pros. My head still doesn't quite work with that one, but I'll get it figured out. And then the masters for the non-pro. And so we're going to create, in the sport of reining, there's going to be a masters non-pro, which is 60 years old and older. I find that interesting. And then that got approved, so we're going to have a new master section. And they talk about in here, this is the fastest growing division in the membership, which is aged non-pros, which tells me they're not getting more non-pros, they're just getting older. That's what it says to me. The next one is legends. Now get this one, Jody. Legends non-pro section, because this is for, if I remember right, 70 years old and older. So this is a new section that got approved. It's called Legends Non-Pro, and these are people that, obviously have been around a long time. They're now over 70. So the next one is a definition of maturity. And this is because the maturity is a definition that goes beyond the age events, because we added 7-year-olds. So now you got the derbies that are 4 to 7, and now you're going to see another section of aged events. I'm guessing at this. I wasn't in these conversations, but a maturity section, because these are 8-year-olds and older. So that's exactly where we're headed. Okay? And again, that's a good sign, because our horses are older and lasting longer. That's a great thing. The next one was, this is updating the definition of Category 8, and this is because of the divorce with the FEI. So the NRHA and the FEI got divorced. I think it was pretty amicable. So, but anyways, they've updated the rule book because they have to take that stuff out, which will lead us to a question, which is an international pieces. This rule was about putting at least 8 horses between runs and draws, and it's because we allow 3 horses. A rider can ride up to 3. A horse can only be entered once, but you can now have at least 8 in between draws. And in the aged events, they're dragging on 5, 6, and 7. So this almost guarantees you to get a drag in between multiple horses. The next one is in general show conditions. This is, and I found this fascinating, a couple of these, because the entry fee cannot be more than 10% of the added money. That's not new news, but the judge's fee cannot exceed the entry fee. And, well, who in the world was doing that? But I would have added one more, which is once the judge's liability is paid for, they shouldn't be able to charge any more judge's fees. That's one that irritates me a lot, because horse show production, well, the reason judges' fees were created was so that show producers had a funding source to hire great judges. They quit doing that and started hiring the cheapest judges they could and used the revenue stream to balance their books, which is added money liability. So I just found it interesting that this rule was on the slate in 2023. I still find it fascinating. We'll keep going. But that's about judges' fees because it can't exceed the entry fee. Well, no duh. Certified show secretaries, and this is saying that because the level of events are getting high and significant, show secretaries can't show at the same show. So that's no duh too, but anyways, apparently some are doing it. Which means one of two things. Either they weren't getting shown very well or the show office wasn't at Surrey, one or the other. So whatever. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what that show secretary section is. The next one is the official videographer. And we talked about this briefly because I was reading through these when they came through, and I found this one fascinating. I find it even more fascinating today because what this says is you can't use AI as official videographer. It has to be manually done as official videographer, and it's because they're using replays and all that stuff, which it's just about how do we begin to incorporate technology and start to use it more advanced, because the next one, so that's all this one is. The official videographer must be manually doing it. That's what that rule was. Judges monitor, this is about mandating a monitor which is on the level of prize money. So when you get the rating on events is based on the amount of prize money offered, and now they're going to mandate that you hire a judge's monitor. The judge's score sheets, this one, I almost fell off my chair laughing. I find it fascinating that we're spending our time and resources at this. But what this says is the judge's score sheets in manual form are the official form, and they must be done, which now means everybody's got to do two things, because anybody trying to use technology, fine to use it, but you're going to have to still be doing a manual transcription, because that's what this rule change, and it was approved, says. So maintaining manual scorecards is still in our sport. I would have loved to have heard this conversation. But anyways.
Well, that one, I can quickly add to that before you go to the next one. I've seen NRHA employees coming back on the same flights that I have from, say, Italy or from Europe, dragging 2 suitcases in each hand because they're bringing score sheets back with them from the event to the NRHA office, right? I mean, at least UPS it, for crying out loud. I mean, they freaking, I can't even go there. I mean, but anyway, I get it.
UPS can get it there quicker than your commercial flight. So
right, exactly.
Yeah. So keep scrolling. That's just score sheets, and the rest of it's language because they update score cards and score sheets. This I find interesting because they're modifying the rules on patterns to allow jog-ins and lope-ins, and they've added 2 patterns that have lope-in, which actually is good. And this is the language that just goes to those patterns. They're the patterns that start in the middle. They're now going to have a section from the gate to the middle where it starts, jog or lope, and that's where we're going. No big deal. Primetime non-pro added money. This is about not allowing the primetime added money must be in line with the non-pro. So the top end non-pro and primetime have to be equal. Primetime can't go above it. And then the next one that was approved was, here's the one, Jody. This requires shows must have a level 4 open and a level 4 non-pro for aged events, meaning you can't have you couldn't put on a regional non-pro derby for level 1 and 2 only. You must have 4, and then I'm assuming the others are optional. I just find that fascinating. And part of that is, and their rationale in here, I think, is somewhat old, because it's about, the rationale is about everybody should be able to enter at an NRHA-approved event, which is when we had 2 classes, an open and a non-pro. That's all there was. Everybody could enter. The open, if you didn't have a non-pro card, that was restricted. That's the only restriction. Well, that's their rationale in here. And I think in today's time, that is old thinking, because your ability to put on an event, if that's what your region and your market is, if you're level 1 and 2 or 2 and 3, that's what your exhibitor pool is, I don't understand why you wouldn't. And if a non-pro's not offered there or an open's not offered there, well, guess what? They know that before they leave home, so they don't go to that event. They go somewhere else, or they go there as a coach, go whatever. I would have loved to have been in that conversation too.
Yeah, I would have too. And like, we've talked about it a million times, the best that our industry has to offer, which would be those upper level open riders, the level 4 riders, and our, top 20 non-pros, they can have that special event. They can make that's the one where we can get lots of added money, and we can get them on television, and we can have the big crowds. But you know what? If I want to have a weekend show because none of my 15 non-pro riders were level 4 riders, they get to go to a horse show. If I want to have I just want to have them show, they get to show, right? I mean, and nobody else. So, yeah, yep. I would like to have been part of that one too.
One of the last ones, this was approved. 65 and older can hold the saddle horn in category 2 and 6. Anyways, I haven't spent a lot of time on that one, but if you're over 65 and you've been riding horses and you need to ride saddle horn, you might need to think about not doing reining. So just my 20 cents. And then the modified patterns, which is what we were talking about. So we can scroll through these. We're not going to go through the detail, but this is rules that allow modified patterns to happen, and you can request it. And then the last ones are the ones that they're adding the trot and the jog or the lope to. And so all this is changing the wording in those patterns to get modern, which is very similar to pattern 5. They've added those, and there's 2 new ones. Because these are the rules that were on the slate that no action was taken. Tail alterations at the top of the list. We were just talking about that. No action. Adding an amateur division. No action. Definition of immediate family. I don't know what the debate on that one is, but it's got to be similar to, there's only male and female. I mean, family's family, and you can prove it now. I don't know what the debate is. Change ancillary to traditional, which is a wording function. Block draws, which is groups. Removing the requirements of ordering the Lawson Trophy, which is obviously some demand that they don't want that overhead. Ties in classes with 2,000 added. Category 2 and 6 in the North American Championships. Ties, we've been hounding this one for years. So it was obviously on the slate with no action, which means they're stuck and they don't know what to do with it. And then removing youth points from eligibility on rookies, which is actually going from youth to adult, I assume. So that would be interesting to see the data on that. And then the last one that was on that had no action was soundness checks before showing. Not sure why that one would have been debatable, but I would think that that'd be a phenomenally great thing to do. You might want to think about doing it when they get to the grounds.
Right. No question.
So that just gives us a taste of kind of where the industry is and what's going on. We're going to step to officiating because there was a number of questions in the officiating category. Obviously, our show, The Score, is now very focused on the analytics of officiating in competition. So we have several episodes, not 15, 19, 20, and 21. We've got some coming. We're going to be doing the 100X event coming up here this month. The 100X Fraternity and Derby and the North American Derby are all in there. So I can't wait to see all of that. But for the audience, those will all be coming. So follow along and follow The Score. But the real question is looking at individual scores versus cumulative scores, the official score, the 220 versus the 3 or 5 marks that got it there. And so that's the bigger question, which is, the questions multiple times came across. They'd love to see us do an analysis on the individuals and how they scored and placed the class as opposed to how the system scored it and placed the class. And so you and I both have views on that, and there's two parts. One is a sole judged event by one judge, and then everything else is multiple judged, 2, 3, or 5.
Right.
So,
well, and I would speak on this a little bit, and especially, you and I have talked a great deal, about the judges needing more tools in their toolbox. But the way the system sits right now, and there may be some that disagree with me, and heck, you might too. But judging is, I would call it fluid for wanting to find a better term for it. But it's maybe not any different than some of the National Football League referees, or that are the ones that decide whether or not there's holding and or pass interference. They always say that the International Football League game, there's holding on every single play, but that group of referees that work together all the time, they decide how much they're going to allow that to happen. So judging can be a little bit that way too. I mean, it can be a little bit fluid, and as an individual, if I judged a single judge show, which I've done and just got done doing one a couple of weeks ago, a small show in Idaho, great fun, great people, and I'm judging by myself. So there's a couple things that I can do because I have enough experience that I can decide not only my maneuver evaluations and my scoring, but I'm also very aware of where I'm going to place the horses. It's my job to find separation, and you and I have talked about ties like crazy, and I have only half-point increments to work with, so sometimes that doesn't make my job any easier, but I still find a way to single my horses out without the ties involved if I can possibly have that done. But there's a huge difference between judging as an individual and judging as a team, because you get into that team environment, that individual score doesn't count anymore. I mean, you can't. We both judged many events with teams, and you get an individual judge in a team environment, both from a monitor standpoint and from guys that are trying to judge on the same team, and he or she is insisting that their score was the right one. You do nothing but cause a major cluster. I mean, it's like it doesn't work that way. So there's, team judging environments are totally different than individual scores, and guys that are that score as individuals, I mean, we're entitled to an opinion. Like we just got done talking about a tail. Somebody may not like that tail that's sticking straight out. I don't mind it. So we're going to have a difference of opinion. That's expected, and it's okay.
No, I hear you. I think the single biggest piece is the one that you're talking about. When you're a sole judge at a given class or an event, you're it. And now your opinion is very valid because that's what you are destined to do.
Sure.
When you become part of and in disciplines, it's different than multi-judged breed shows, because you have 5 judges at the Paint World Show. You have 5 different scores. That's what you're doing. You're showing one run under 5 different, it'd be like 5 shows in one. In a multi-judge discipline function that the rest of us are doing, we use multiple judges to get one score, and that's the team that you're talking about. So the answer to the multiple questions on looking at individuals inside multiple judge systems, my answer to that is it's not very relevant. It's only relevant to the association, the chair of, or not, the director of officials, and the judges committees. That is individual performance over time, and that's their responsibility to look at, and it means nothing else to the rest of the equation, and it's not worth putting time into what that does. The individual score inputs going into the master's score are part of that component, and you and I have been spending a lot of time beating those things up. And it's not the score as much as it is the maneuver evaluation. And what we've helped identify is that there's basically 2 boxes, which is a movement of standard assigned by the sport, the industry itself. And it's moving year after year. And those 2 boxes are moving up because the depth of competition is moving up. And so that's really where it is. So the individual becomes a minute factor, and we just don't spend the time on it. Anybody can do it. You can look at the score sheets. They're all posted online. You can do whatever you want to. But the point to that is, when you're 1 of 3, your significance is 30%. When you're 1 of 5, you could be 0 or you could be 30%. But that's it as far as your significance.
Yep, absolutely. But yeah, there's, like I said, the difference between accuracy and placings, like I said, is a huge difference, and it's a good explanation. But yeah, the team environment is way different than a single judge.
Yes, and then when you talk about placing, because the thing that you and I spend so much time on is the cut line to making finals, and then the payout, and there's no way that any team of officials, there's no way in an individual, you can't have 100 horses with 6 different entry divisions and keep that stuff sorted. You can't do it. It's not possible. So you're marking what comes in front of you, and your ability to place 10 through 15th, it's on level 3, it's impossible. So we would have to advance ourselves in a whole different format if that was the end goal. I would say that's the significance of the end goal, because the prize money distribution is what records are all about. Studs, mares, siblings, owners, trainers, all of it. That's what we're all doing. And there are multiple ways by which we could advance that in today's time, but we're nowhere near it.
No question. Yep.
We are circles, because we're still on officiating. So the other question in the officiating category, and I wanted you in particular to talk about, because circle, the question is, how important is downward transitions in circles? And that came across half a dozen times. And I can surmise where that question comes from, because as we've all watched reining, you see that in a very diverse set of exhibitions. So then what is the officiating system supposed to do about it? I then put it in together because both of them, upward transitions and downward transitions, add to the complexity of why are circles so diversely marked at the maneuver level. This is one of the significant factors. There's a number of them. Tails is one, quality of motion is one, attitude is one, pattern placement is one, transitions are one, departures are one, and lead changes are another. I just gave a long list. Well, all of that. So talk about the transitions. Importance.
Transitions are really important, and from a personal standpoint, both because I've trained so many of them and I judge so many of them, I am. The downward transition means more to me than upward transition, because upward transition I would constantly coach. I would train my horses. We don't go from 0 to 60 in one stride, right? We don't go from slow, small to large, fast, wide open. We take 2 or 3 strides with that quarter circle to build to that large, fast, and then hold those 2, or hold the pattern 8, large, fast, slow down. So I don't expect a rider to jump from 1 stride to wide open in a large, fast circle. I give him more time. But the horse that can do downward transition in 1 stride spot on in the middle, that horse gets the most credit, right? So there's a difference between transitions. But, you just gave us 7 different things that you talked about that can happen in circles for differences in judges' opinions. And I could challenge a reader to say, or a viewer to say, if I have a horse that runs 2 excellent large fast circles, and I'm talking plus 1.5ers, excellent large fast circles, downward transition takes a quarter of a slow small to get there. Is my maneuver reduction drop a whole quarter point? Do I go from a 1.5 to a point, or do I go drop him clear to a half? Then the next horse that comes in and runs 2 good large fast circles and does a good downward transition in 1 stride, how do we mark those? And it's from an education standpoint, and that's not something that judges committee does. They don't beat that up. They don't say, here's what we're going to do in this situation. Now, there's lots of examples of it, but it's kind of left up to us as individual judges to say, that's how much this means to me. But yeah, transitions mean a big part of it. But yeah, the downward means more than the upward to me.
Good. I hope the audience appreciates that one, because there's the answer. So they can all go practice, and they'll know when they go show that the downward is more important than the upward. So good.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you. Transparency from the association. This was also, all of these came in multiple times, but it's obvious that the membership in all of its forms, and it doesn't matter which breed or discipline, people are feeling the same thing. As interest in audience and fans grow to horse sports, the pros and cons of rapid growth and how will it affect the industry moving forward. That's the question. Transparency from the association, and then the pros and cons of rapid growth. And so let me just put on my 20 cents, because I think we've already hit it in a couple of things, because from mine, there's 2 parts. I think our associations belong to us, the members. And I get to say that in a large plural sense, because I'm a life member of many, and I'm a current member of many as well. So I belong to a lot. So, including on the English side, because I'm a USEF life member. I have been for 35 years. And the point is, they belong to us, the members. And it's our responsibility to then be respectful, but institute change, be inquisitive, ask for, inquire, request, all of those things. And the larger the organization, you've got to be a little bit patient in there, but they belong to us. And those leaders and the staff work for us. And so that's where everything starts and stops. So if the associations aren't being transparent, we, the members, can absolutely request and mandate that they are, because as a member in good standing, you're entitled to everything, almost everything, except for personnel records and a few of those things, but
right.
Which is fine. The other thing is the pros and cons of growth, and I think the big thing of growth is in as we get exposed to the public more, and all it carries is a responsibility. And if we would actually behave like we say, which is the horses first, I don't think that this is overwhelmingly hard, but competition makes people do really silly, dumb stuff. And so I think we've just got to help ourselves as the depth of competition and the rewards of competition and all those things keep going, because we all want it. And it doesn't matter what sport. Talk to people that made an Olympic team and then didn't get to compete at the Olympics. It's hard stuff to do, but it's not the end of the world, and so we'll all be okay. And that's kind of where my 20 cents is on the pro and con of growth. Horses have a different place in people's lives, and that is nothing but pro in my world. The con is only that we have to be more responsible, but I don't think it's hard. So it minimizes the con list in my world. what's your take on all that?
Well, and there's a couple things, and as you scripted this, you wrote down some interesting stuff. But the one thing that the common denominator that I find fascinating, and because we had some dealings with AQHA in the past year. Their membership is falling by almost double digits yearly. It's crazy how, by their admission, they're dropping like crazy. So membership is down. I mean, it's not even staying at a current level. I mean, with NRHA also, I mean, the membership is not growing, but entries are up. And we've on our show, I think that we talked with our president-elect about, they view as long as the entries are healthy and are growing, then that's a successful show for them. Amy and I had some discussion. My wife had some discussion about that. And she said, "Well, why is that?" And I said, I really don't know. I do know that there is kind of like that aged pool of non-pro riders that we just talked about that is growing. There's a certain level of people that can afford to do this. Our horses are showing longer, which means that there's more horses are coming to the events. In other words, in the past, if we had a 6-year-old that was shot, now we have 7 and 8-year-olds that can still continue to show. So they're coming along. They're coming along for the ride also. So that could be a reason. But I don't have I do know that membership needs to. You continue to have new members. Otherwise, it's finite. It's short-lived. So. If the youth classes, the green. Go ahead. Excuse me.
No, ours is aging because we're just putting rules in for 60s and 70s.
Right, exactly. So we need to do something to attract the kids, the green riders, those starter level classes. I mean, that's where the growth comes from. It doesn't come from the existing group of people. We already know that people that love the sport. Our horse sport, the reiners, the cutters, no matter what it is, if they're aged and older people as we are, and they can afford to do it, they're the ones that have the checkbooks that can afford to do it, so they stay in it longer, right? I mean, but it's we just need to figure out a way. So cost is up. We talk about that, and the fair competition, high demand, which is officiating, that is up. It's kind of a catch-22, like we talked about earlier in the show. It's the weekend shows are spots for starter-level people to go and have fun, and they used to be fun. But those big competitions are not the place to start. And I think that people take a look at that, shake their head, and go, if it costs me $10,000 to go to this show for a week, in addition to what my other stuff costs, they go, I'm out. So. Yeah, it's the growth is it's a confusing spot. It's a hard place to talk about because I don't understand it. I do know from the transparency standpoint, that's part of the reason that NRHA always made the judges' scores that were posted so that people could actually go check them. It was a heck of an idea. That kind of transparency needs to happen. There is not enough transparency in the boards of directors of different associations, I believe, not just talking about the Reining Horse Association, because there are some things that they don't want the public to know or their membership to know. I mean, it's pretty common knowledge. So, but I also tell people that complain about that, it's kind of like over the years you've heard the same thing. You have a horse trainer come up and complain about the officiating at an event, and I'll go, have you been to a judge's school or do you have your card? And they go, no. And I go, well, that's step number one when it comes to complaining. It's like you need to be able to know what you're talking about. So I've also just had some issues where I thought about maybe if there's some changes needed, but and all of a sudden we have to go get on the board of directors. We need to make sure that we get on the executive committee. There's a couple of guys that need to go ahead and run for president and or be that president-elect. And you know what? It's a lot of work and a lot of complaining, and it doesn't pay a thing. So, it's like I can't bitch too loudly because I'm not making an effort to go ahead and try to fix that and or to make sure that transparency is there. So anyway, I don't know if that makes much sense, but it takes an effort to do it.
Yes, and that's what everybody's going to have to recognize, that if you want to institute change, you got to get involved, and that requires effort.
Right.
The transparent the influence. The modern use of politics is about persuading things to be towards your preference, that influence, and that's where our whole kind of industry is and being dominated by. And so, anyways, I hear you, and it takes the effort, and that's what people are going to have to do. Or, if there is no noise, if there is no conversation, if there is no rule proposals, it must mean everything's okay,
right,
by the members and or the exhibitors. So that's a balance that everybody's got to go through, and that's why we spent the time with the rule changes, because I found it fascinating. Not only on the ones that got approved were dominated by the non-pros, and it was dominated by the aging of the non-pros, and the data coming out of the association says that's the fastest growing group, which means we as a membership is getting older. Well, no duh. Yeah, you can look at you and me and figure that one out.
Right, absolutely. For sure.
We got a couple more to go, and like always, time marches fast, but I do want to hit these because I want to make sure that the entire audience knows that we are listening. We are doing our best to bring them the things that are important to them, but the equine breeding business and the future of it. And before we jump, I want a couple things. Because we did some episodes that have sale data in it, but we had a phenomenal episode with Aldo Ramon and Rancho El Fortin, who happens to, that farm is in Mexico, but he has breeding horses and stock horses and charro horses on both sides of the border. So he's breeding and supplying and competing in 2 countries here in North America. And it was a fascinating show and conversation. I actually really, really enjoyed it. So I would encourage people to go back and follow that one.
Agreed.
Aldo is also very active on social media, so follow him as well. But the breeding business, while a lot of things are up, that's a good thing. Cost of horses and cost of entry is up and all the rest of that. Breeding business is probably as solid as it's ever been. So in my lifetime, in our lifetime, would you somewhat agree with that?
Oh, totally. I mean, we hit a flat spot there where there were no available, well, not, I want to say no available horses, but the numbers were way, 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 way down. And now all of a sudden it's like, well, with the prices that these things are bringing, it's like everybody's wanting to, like I said, mare power, it means more now than it ever has before, right? It's like crazy. The sales thing, I mean, the last few that I've taken to sales have done way beyond expectations for me. So, I mean, you have an idea, okay, well, I think this is kind of what this horse maybe is going to bring. It's, whoop, they always bring more, and it's like, holy cow. Right. We talked about that, episode 11 with the Rain Cow Horses Vice President Paul Bailey, the senator from Tennessee, and we talked about the yearling prices. It's just, like I said, I still can't get over it.
Bring that up real quick. This is actually the up and coming. This is the next 15 across all 3 advanced disciplines, 5-year average, which is telling you up and coming pros, they're earning $150,000 a year. Okay, back it down and call it 60 to 75. That was one person in our time, Jody. You now got, this is the 15 below the top 15. So
right. Yep.
That's where the industry is. The sales were very strong last fall. So no matter where you might be in the breeding business or looking at the breeding business, because quality young prospects, you can sell weanlings and yearlings now, where in our time, no, you needed to hold on to them, get them to 2-year-olds, let them start to go. The industry is very strong. So from a stallion owner to a mare owner to buying and selling prospects to buying and selling, so to speak, finished horses.
Yeah,
It's all strong.
It is. Yeah, it's changed. It has changed so much. I've said in the past that I never would buy a yearling. I couldn't. I always made fun of the people that went to Keeneland, right, to the thoroughbred yearling sale, and I mean, spend $500,000, $750,000 on a yearling, and they didn't know if it could outrun me. And it was kind of the same way I was with the Rainers. I wanted to buy a 2-year-old. At least I would know it would be quiet and it could stop. But the price bracket goes up with those too. So it's
yeah.
It's
well,
crazy.
the more you know, the more it's going to cost, and that's the way
Yep.
it should be. So
Absolutely. Okay.
So, international governance. We've got 2 more questions to go. We'll whack them quick, but international governance. And the question is, now that the FEI and the NRHA got a divorce, and the market is there is no FEI. So FEI exists. It's sticking in the 6 original disciplines, which is all on the English side. So be it. And they're doing what they're doing.
Right.
Relative to the stock horse side of the world, there is no international structure. So the question comes up often, and I hear it a lot just out in the industry, just talking. It's like, what are we going to do about it? Here's the simple question. A true world champion. Because in all other sports, a world champion is a culmination of those top athletes on a world level. And that would be naming a world champion. We've been modifying that title on the North American side for a long time. And I've been an advocate of, those should be national titles. A true world champion is yet to be developed. The World Equestrian Games was the closest that we'd seen. And so the question becomes, is there a need to have an international governing body? And the next question is, Jody, similar to yours, because could a world championship be developed without an international governing body? And the answer is yes, it can.
Absolutely. Yes.
I would think, the world reigning that just happened in Switzerland is a first step into that category. Reigning Australia did their fraternity and national. They have their own governance at a national level, and it paid well, which means could you start to ship horses and riders and start to play on a world level, but more on a free market kind of standpoint? And it's an interesting question. I am of one that would really question whether or not an international body is needed. I'd just say let the market do it.
I agree, and I mean it. I don't know if this makes sense to you or not, but it almost is starting with the Run for $1 Million. I mean, we're seeing horses ship in to qualify for the money. I mean, it's there, they're coming. It doesn't matter, and we have riders coming from all over the world, and it's like it can be done. That's telling us that it certainly can be done. And the FEI was that was pretty much about control and influence. That those 2 words come from you, and that's what that organization was about. So I'm not sure that I agree with you. I don't think we need one of those. I think that rules, and if somebody can manage it and have the venue and the money, they will come, and it can happen, and it would be way exciting. I mean, look at the World Cup with the girls right now, the soccer teams, right? I mean, they're going to be a true world champion, so it can happen with us too.
Well, and we can go back to golf and what Live and PGA and a merger and all that kind of stuff. They threatened each other because of independent tours, blah, blah, blah. It all comes out, but you've got multiple national or continental tours in the sport of golf. What does that mean as you try to take a step up? I agree with you. And I have no idea where they're ultimately going with the Run for the Million other than they're bringing the Run for the Million for all 3 cowboy disciplines, cow, horse, cutting, and reining. And it's going to be there this year. And so would they be a great one if that was in their vision and goal? Sure. And they're already 3/4 of the way there, which would answer the question, you don't need one. So that's the real answer. So we don't need one.
Exactly. As long as the management's there to take care of it, and you've got the venue, and the money, it'll happen. Okay, you know what? To bring us home, like I said, we've run on, but I've had so much fun. There's been great topics to talk about. But we had several questions and requests about the NCEA activity. So Brian, you want to touch on that a little bit before we go about the college girls?
Well, we did that episode with Oklahoma State. And it was a great piece, and so everybody. And we also had a lot of response. which was positive. And then the question had come in several times that they wanted more. Well, the simple answer is we're working on it.
Right.
That's the simple answer. Not trying to cop out. We are. It's just we all have. There's a lot to do. Can we get it all every day? No, but are we in due time? The collegiate equine competition is absolutely on your and my radar. And so can we go explore that more so and get some more of those coaches and directors and program developers on as guests and talk about what does that mean for all the parts of the industry, but especially advancing young adults into the equine world. And so the answer is it's on our radar. We have a high want and desire to explore that more because the intercollegiate as well as the NCEA, which is a subdivision of the NCAA, because only women are there right now because of Title IX. And I learned a lot in that one. We plan on it. So that's the simple answer. So it just takes time to coordinate things, make contact, and away we go.
It does indeed. Well, cool. Well, yeah, and I promise you, I'm right along with it. That'll be a fun one to do too. So, well, it takes time. Hit your subscription button for us, and we'll stay saddled up and keep bringing you the quality content. If you have questions or thoughts, curiosity, send us a note, cowboyoffice.com, and we will bring you the answers. So I just, thank you, Cowboy Office.
Yes, thank you very much. And as you know, horses are good for people. And until next time, enjoy the ride.
Stay in the middle.
Today's episode is brought to you by 4D Productions in cooperation with the Consultment Agency, a full-service agency that helps bring forward-thinking equine brands into the 21st century using digital skills and services such as website development, graphic design, social media, and media production such as the podcast you're consuming here today. Thank you so much for riding along with us today. Sign up at cowboyoffice.com to be the first to know about topics affecting the industry we love so much. You can reach out to us with topics you care about by finding us on TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and all podcast platforms. And remember, share this episode with someone that may enjoy it, because the more we can share our horses with others, the better our world will be.